Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Ridenauer, and we have another big episode ahead of us today. I hope everyone's weekend was very enjoyable. I had a friend of mine from college actually fly into town and visit, so it was nice to get together with some friends this weekend and try to find things to do within the social distancing parameters. But regardless, it was nice to see him and my other friends as well. Like I mentioned, there are a lot of things to cover today, so I'll get right into it. And what we have in store for us today, first off, another recap of games and any news that is floating around the league from the games on August 28th. A lot of things going on in baseball, so we will get into all of that. And then afterwards, I'm going to discuss the MVPs of the last 10 years, who they were and where they are now, and what their careers have been like since those huge years they had in baseball. Following our second segment today, I want to get into another new topic, which is biggest MLB busts. So players who were highly touted and had a lot of potential but never panned out the way people thought they would. And then, as always, stick around for the final few minutes of the show as I'll share which cities I feel will have a baseball team next, why I think they would be a good city for baseball, and even try to come up with some team names for those select markets. So I'll get right into it with some recaps from games on Friday, August 28th. And let me tell you what, there was a lot of good games going on. Again, I'll kick it off. Brewers-Pirates, first one, and the Brewers doing everything they could to take down the Pirates, and it did work. They won in 9-1 decision, and it was all Brewers from the jump. Bottom one, they were able to get the first run of the game up, and then they put on 3 in the bottom of the third, 2 in the bottom of the fourth, and 2 in the bottom of the fifth, as well as 1 in the bottom of the seventh. Pittsburgh was only able to put up 1 in the top of the seventh, so a really big struggle for Pittsburgh, and they continue to do a really poor job from not only, the pitching, but also from the plate as well, mainly because of the fact that they just, I don't know what it is with this team, with this Pirates team, but I've run out of things to say about them. I really have. I can't believe I'm saying that, because I usually don't run out of things to say, but I have run out of things to say. So Milwaukee, though, great job by them. Jed Jerko had 2 home runs last night. Also, Ryan Braun had a 3-run home run. Corbin Burns had an unbelievable performance from the mound, striking out 10 Pirates. He got the first win of his 2020 season. He's got a 2.78 ERA, so really good win for Milwaukee. Hopefully they can start to, maybe get a couple wins up in their wins column in the next couple weeks before, playoffs really start ramping up, and they can make some sort of late season push for the playoffs. Next game was actually a doubleheader, so 2 games that ended in 7 innings. First one, Mets-Yankees taking on each other, a little Subway Series rivalry. Mets winning the first game of the doubleheader, 6-4. Yankees came out all over the Mets, though, scoring 2 runs in the bottom of the first and 2 in the bottom of the second, and then the Mets were able to tack on 1 in the top of the fifth, and that top of the sixth was really where things blew wide open for the Mets, as they were able to put up 5 runs in that top 6 inning to ultimately win 6-4. Mets did a really nice job with 3 home runs on the day. Pete Alonso had a really nice game himself, being one of those guys hitting a home run. Michael Wacha had an awesome game back from his injury, so he, striking out 7 in his performance on the mound. So really nice job from him, and just really, the Mets are, they're starting to peter back and forth between 500 and then below 500, 500 and below 500. If they can start to get a little bit of a roll here, I really do think that they could maybe make a push for the playoffs. I know I've said the Mets and I've said the Phillies. I just don't see the Marlins making that added push towards, the postseason like I think that they should, or I think people are thinking they should. And especially with the Braves and how well they've been playing, nobody's taking that top spot from them. But you can almost count that at least the Mets or Phillies are going to try and make some sort of case. And I know I'm leaving out the Nationals in that NL East, but I just really don't see them capitalizing on their World Series win from last year. Again, a team that struggled in the first half of the season last year. So, again, a team that doesn't really start out well. And this year, if you don't start out well, it's going to come back and bite you really bad. So we'll see what happens out in the NL East, though. But then the second part of the doubleheader, Yankees, Mets winning in that one also. So they swept the doubleheader matchup between the Yankees. This one was a closer one, 4-3. The Mets able to score the first run of the game in the bottom first, and then in the top of the third, the Yankees put up 3 runs, and then it was 1 in the bottom of the 5th and 2 in the bottom of the 7th. Ahmad Rosario's walk-off home run was the deciding factor in that 4-3 game. So again, great doubleheader matchup in the Subway Series, and really 2 good wins by the Mets, able to take down the Yankees. Yankees are now 16-13 on the year, while the Mets are 1 game below 500 at 15-16. Next game ending in extra innings, final in 10. Orioles Blue Jays. Blue Jays getting the loss, Orioles getting the loss 5-4 as the Blue Jays, they did a pretty nice job. I mean, they battled their whole way back into this game because they were up, and then Baltimore came right back into it, and then the Blue Jays were able to come out on top. Blue Jays scored the first 2 runs of the game in the bottom of the 4th, and then Baltimore put on 2 runs in the top of the 6th, and then Toronto was able to put on 1 run in the bottom of the 6th, and then top of the 8th, Baltimore was able to put on that 1 run, tied it up, went into extras, and then the Orioles actually took a 4-3 lead going into the bottom of the 10th, so they scored 1 run in the top of the 10th, and then Toronto, off of a Randall Grinchuk's 2-run walk-off home run, that's what, again, decided that one. So we had 2 walk-offs last night so far in the games that, we've gone through in this segment. Really loved watching these walk-off wins. I mean, you can't not love a nice walk-off home run or a walk-off single or walk-off double, whatever it might be. Even though there's no fans, there's still that feeling of exuberance and just elation over winning that game in such a down to the wire, if you will, and your back's up against the wall. How do you respond? How do you try and capitalize on any sort of mistakes that the other team makes, whatever it might be? I mean, extra inning games, I personally think that's some of the most exciting baseball that you can really see. So the next game, Phillies Braves losing to the Phillies 7-4. This was also an extra inning decision. Phillies were able to score 2 runs in the bottom of the 3rd and then 2 runs in the bottom of the 4th, while Atlanta was able to tack on 1 run in the top of the 4th. Scott Kingery's, again, another walk-off, this one being Scott Kingery's walk-off homer in the bottom of the 11th, a 3-run homer. So that was going into the extras, it was a 4-4 game after the Phillies scored the first 2, and then Atlanta put on that 1 run in the top of the 4th, and then 1 run in the top of the 6th, and 2 in the top of the 7th. So they did a nice job at spreading out that offense through, innings 4 through 7, and then ultimately it was Scott Kingery's home run that, propelled them into, the Phillies being propelled into taking down the Braves, which, again, Phillies are 1 game under 500, so they're 13-14, Mets are 15-16, 2 very, very, even teams in terms of winning percentage, just, 1 game under 500. So could they catch the Braves? I don't know, but I could see those 2 teams really starting to, battle it out and go back and forth, if you will. Andrew McCutchen with a big 2-run home run himself. Gene Segura also had a 2-run home run, so a lot of power hitting for the Phillies, which, again, that's a great sign out of their bats moving into the second half of the season. Can that power in their bats and in their lineup carry and translate into more and more wins in the next 30 games of the season? Next game, Reds-Cubs. Reds coming out on top over Chicago, 6-5. Chicago scored the first 2 runs of the top of the 1st, and then Cincinnati scoring 1 run in the bottom of the 2nd, and then Cincinnati tacking on 2 more runs in the bottom of the 4th and bottom of the 5th. But it was Chicago scoring 3 runs in the top of the 9th that I think should have the Reds a little scared. I mean, if you're up commanding, 6-2, and then you go into the top of the 9th thinking you're going to have an easy, walk in the park win, not so much when you run into the Cubs. I mean, they put up 3 runs in that top of the 9th. They almost made a comeback. That's again a very, very scary sign if you're the Reds, who 3 games under 500, they're 14-17 now. You don't want to have games like that. You don't want to have miscues where you lose a game in the final 8th inning or the final 9th inning of the game, or in even extras, because again, as we get closer to the postseason, games like that are going to start mattering even more. And so we can't, if you're one of these teams, you can't have those games start to pile on each other, because it could really lead to some problems for your team down the road. Next game, Royals White Sox. White Sox getting the win 6-5, and the White Sox, I mean, they remain hot. They are one of the hottest, if not the hottest, baseball team in the MLB. White Sox scored the first run of the game in the bottom of the 2nd. Royals were able to score 2 runs in the top of the third, and then Chicago scoring 2 runs in the bottom of the fifth, and then 1 in the bottom of the sixth, 1 in the bottom of the seventh, and then in the ninth inning, both teams scoring 1 run, and it was actually another walk-off win. So we've had a lot of walk-offs on Friday. Yasmani Grandal being the walk-off winner for the White Sox, hitting a walk-off homer in that bottom 9 inning. Eloy Jimenez also hit a huge bomb for the White Sox, a 452 shot, and then Luis Roberts' solo home run also went very far. So again, a lot of power in that White Sox lineup, and this Royals team, I mean, they're pretty much out of it. So it's going to be a 3-way battle between the Twins, White Sox, and Cleveland in that, NL or AL Central as to who can come out on top and who can, maybe make some noise and make the playoffs. Next one, Rays Marlins, a little, Sunshine State rivalry. Rays winning 2-0, and this was actually a game where no runs were scored until the top of the 8th inning, with Tampa scoring 1 in the top of the 8th and then 1 in the top of the 9th. Really, I mean, talk about some, defensive battle. Talk about some really good pitching on both teams' end. Fairbanks getting the win for the Rays, moving to 4-1 on the year with a 3.07 ERA. Again, I mean, this Rays team, they're a fun team to watch because it's a small market, low payroll team, but they get the job done. They really are able to grind out wins. They win in any possible way that they can. Not to mention they've got a great farm system. So on top of all of that, I mean, how can you not, love the energy that they play with? And not to mention they could very well catch the Yankees. I mean, if the Yankees start slipping, and again, with how well the Rays are playing right now and how well they played all year, we could see maybe the Rays, start nipping at the heels of the Yankees in that AL East. So the next game, Nationals, Red Sox. Nationals winning in easy fashion, 10-2. 5 runs were scored in the top of the third by Washington. Boston put on 1 run in the bottom of the third, and then Washington scored 1 in the top of the fourth, 1 in the top of the sixth, and then 3 in the top of the 8th. So a lot of runs, a lot of offense, 16 hits total for the Nationals. Juan Soto had a 2-run home run. Max Scherzer was unbelievable, finally getting back into a groove a little bit for the Nationals. Struck out 11 and got the win. He moves to 3-1 on the season with a 3.86 ERA. Trey Turner had a 2-run double, and it's great to see Turner getting involved in that offense because he's a guy who could either hit 280, 285 and have really nice, contact hitting numbers, and also, a great guy to get on the base path because he's very, very likely to, move over, whether it's on a steal or on a sac fly or whatever it might be, a great base runner. So to see him get it going a little bit and get a little extra base hit, you got to love that if you're the Nationals. Moving into the next game, Rangers, Dodgers. Rangers coming out on top and beating the Dodgers, who are 24-10 now. LA is coming to play this year, and I think that they're coming for a vengeance. I think they're angry. I think they're mad that, the 2 of the last 3 years they were in the World Series. And, not last year, but, the 2 years prior to that, and losing to the Astros, and especially with everything coming out with what the Astros did, I think the Dodgers are, their determination is at an all-time high right now. I think it's a different determination that, we've never really seen out of this Dodgers team. I think they're hungry to win, and they want to prove a point. So in this one, Texas scored the first 2 runs of the game in the bottom of the third, and then put on 4 more runs in the bottom of the seventh. I mean, a really big 7th inning for Texas, and they're 12-19, pretty much, I don't want to say they're out of it, but they're most likely out of it. And I know that there's been other teams this year that have been seemingly out of it in what we would think as, they're 6 games under 500, with 20 or 25 games into the season, and then all of a sudden they win 6 in a row, they're back at 500, and then now we're having a playoff conversation about them. So the Rangers are in a little bit of a different situation, being 7 games under 500 and really in a tough AL West with the A's playing lights-out baseball, and then the Astros actually playing a lot better as of recently. So this Rangers, Mariners, Angels, it's just going to be a battle for last place, I think. I really do think that, and it's unfortunate because I remember saying before the season started, and I've said this many times, I thought the Angels would be a good team to watch, and they aren't. They haven't been. I will say Derek Dietrich has been a huge pickup for the Rangers. Another big home run for him last night. And again, when you have a guy who's hitting just straight power numbers like Derek Dietrich does, he's a big power hitter guy, you got to love that. And in an offense that is otherwise lacking a little bit this year, that is always a really, really, really good sign. So next game, Indians, Cardinals, a little, Midwest Central battle here. Cleveland scoring the first 4 runs of the game in the top of the first and then tacking on 2 more runs in the top of the second. Cleveland ultimately won this one 14-2, and it was 4 runs in the top of the first and top of the sixth, and then 2 runs in the top of the second, top of the fifth, and top of the seventh for the Indians. So a lot of runs being scored in multiple different innings, and again, if you're a team that can stretch that out through the entirety of a 9-inning game, you are that much more dangerous going into the playoffs because your offense can come at any point of the game. Doesn't really matter at all. Franmil Reyes has had a 3-hit, 5 RBI game. So again, a guy that isn't really mentioned a whole lot in their lineup, but being able to produce and contribute, it takes the pressure off of other guys in the lineup that have been, like Nelson Cruz or Eddie Rosario, who hit well and are, more prominent hitters. Having Reyes' bat in that lineup is definitely going to pay dividends for them come playoff time. Indians move to 20-12 now. Really great year for them. Next game, Padres-Rockies battle the NL West, and the Padres, they continue their reign. They continue to play really well. Move to 20-14 after a 10-4 win over the Rockies. Colorado scored the first 4 runs of the game in that bottom first inning. Really big. Opening it up with 4 runs in that bottom first frame. You got to love that if you're Rockies, but you can't like the fact that those were the only 4 runs scored of the game for you. Top of the fourth, 1 run was scored by the Padres, and then they scored 3 in the top of the fifth, 4 in the top of the sixth, and then 2 in the top of the eighth. Will Myers had a 4-hit game. He's been playing very, very well. Ty Francis, he had a 4 RBI game. Matt Kemp, though, I will say, had a 3-run homer in the bottom of the first inning. So, the old man's still getting it done. I know I mentioned him earlier on in the year because I was so surprised with his numbers, and they've kind of started to, plateau and flatten out a little bit, but still being able to produce at that kind of level and produce that well, and especially with how old he is in his mid-30s and how he hasn't really been producing to the level that he is used to, it's a great sign for the Rockies to have that added help in their lineup because, who knows? Trevor Story has been injury-prone in the past. Same thing with Nolan Arenado, who hasn't been hitting very well this year. So, having his extra help and his extra bat is going to add more, more of a dynamic with them, and it's also going to help out Charlie Blackmon. Overall, it's just going to bolster all of the hitting. So the next game, Mariners, Angels, again, a battle of 2 of the worst teams in the AL West. Angels winning this one in a tight one, 3-2. And Seattle scored the first run of the game in the top of the sixth, while the Angels scored 2 in the bottom of the sixth, and then the Angels scored 1 in the bottom of the eighth, and then Seattle scoring only 1 in the bottom of the ninth. But again, a very, very close comeback for the Mariners, scoring that 1 run in the top of the ninth, and very similar to the game from earlier that I mentioned with the Royals and the White Sox. You're able to score in that top of the 9th inning. That's you're starting to put the pressure on the other team, and that is where that's where teams can be really dangerous by scoring those late inning runs. The Cubs, same thing. They scored 3 in the top of the ninth in that game. So if you're able to do that, you're going to start putting some pressure on these other teams, and they might not react very well, and then they might crack under that pressure. So, again, moving forward, we're going to have to see if these teams that are able to score late end games are going to be able to, play that out in some sort of way come playoff time. And then the final game of the evening, D-backs Giants. D-backs taking this one 7-4. Arizona scoring 1 run in the bottom of the first, 2 in the bottom of the third, and then 4 in the bottom of the fifth. So really, spread out offense for Arizona. Again, San Francisco scored 3 runs in the top of the ninth. So we're starting to see more and more teams that are, scoring those late inning runs. How are teams going to respond to that? And can they make sure that they keep, those opponents at bay and not allow them to, take any sort of lead in that top 9 inning, because going to that bottom 9 inning, it just adds so much more pressure than you had before entering the 9th inning. So that was the final game of the evening, as the Twins and Tigers doubleheader was postponed, as well as the Athletics and Astros. And a lot of these games have started to become postponed because of the recent shooting of Jacob Blake in Wisconsin. And quite frankly, I really like how, the players are trying to take a stand right now, right? They're really trying to make their voices heard because they've got such a big platform. And I'll only spend a couple minutes on this, but basically how I look at this and what I have to say about this is this. it's great that they are deciding to take a stand and that they are wanting, change, which is much needed. And it's very obvious. And if you have not yet noticed that, then you might not have opened social media. You haven't clicked on the news. I don't know what you're doing, but it's very apparent that there is something going on in our society that is a big-time issue. And it's become, more and more apparent as time has gone on. But I will say, here's my one thing about deciding not to play. Now, I think that the way that some of these teams did do it, where they go on the field, they all take a moment of silence and they walk off, I think that has a lot more of an impact than how the Milwaukee Bucks in the NBA did it the other night, where they just decided not to even come out on the court. It was kind of a big time. Nobody knew that was going to happen. There was some miscommunication. They had a meeting apparently that I guess the meeting did not go so great afterwards. So I think the overall consensus is this: if there is going to be something like this, let's all communicate first and foremost, right? Second off, being a professional athlete and having the platform that you have, it is so powerful. And I don't know if, people really realize that, because everybody in America, for the most part, at some point or another in their life, is going to turn on a sports game. It's just part of our culture. It's part of our society. So as a result, millions of people, by just clicking one button, can instantly tune in to a game where, players are wearing Black Lives Matter t-shirts, players are wearing, shirts for victims of police brutality, and so the impact goes so much further now because millions of people are tuned in and seeing, wow, all of these players are all in on this. I'm going to be in on this as well. This is incredible. And it's very powerful. It's very, very moving to see that as a fan and as a watcher and as a viewer. But when you don't play and when you're off the field, off the court, whatever, now your platform has been, reduced to whatever is maybe portrayed on social media, or whatever sort of, video might come out, or story about what kind of change or trying to, forward movement that these players are trying to do with, working with legislation and, working with local governments and everything else. We don't know what's going on with that because it's not in the public eye, like playing a game and, portraying that and sharing that message and sharing that, what everything is going on. And without that, now we don't get to see it. So my one thing is, I understand why players are wanting to sit out, yes, but at the same time, I think that their message would be heard so much more by playing and by showing, hey, we're going to keep going, we're going to keep, knocking at this door, and we're going to keep letting everybody in America know that we are serious about this. And, again, once we do make a change, it's going to be very impactful. And the change will come. A change will happen. I really do believe that. So, again, my final thoughts on that, I think it's a great thing that they decided to step away from the game for a day or two, but I think that this idea of maybe prolonging that, I think, would actually hurt more than help, just because their message and their, everything that they're trying to promote and trying to encourage in this change in our society is now taking a back seat because we can't see that on a massive, large platform that they have. So those are my final thoughts on that. But again, a really great day of baseball on Friday, August 28th. Looking forward to this weekend and this upcoming week, and a lot of really good games that are on the horizon. So that'll do it for us in this first segment, but stay right there, folks, because after the commercial, I'll dive right into our second segment, which will feature a discussion on the last 10 MVPs in baseball, where they are now, and what kind of careers they've had since those huge years in the MLB. We'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA, to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Reiner with you all, and in our first segment, I got right into a recap of games from Friday, August 28th. A lot of action went on in those slate of games, and some news floating around the league as well. A lot of extra inning games, some walk-off wins as well. So again, great day of baseball. Be sure to stick around for the final few minutes of the episode today, as I'll share which cities I feel could be the next destinations for baseball teams and why a team, potentially could fit in those select markets. I want to now jump into this segment of where the last 10 MVP winners in both the AL and NL are right now and what kind of careers they've had since those monumental years they had. So I'll start off with the MVP winners in both the AL and NL, and I'll go from the year 2010 to present and discuss the winners of each year and how they've performed since then. So 2010, we had in the AL, Josh Hamilton, and in the NL, Joey Votto. And Josh Hamilton, again, very interesting. He was the only non-active player to win the MVP in the last 10 years. And Josh Hamilton had an unbelievable story of how he overcame his drug addiction and then went on to have an improbable reign in baseball that lasted a good 5 or 6 years where he was one of the most feared hitters in baseball. 2010 proved to be the best year he had in his career. Batted .359, which led the majors, had a .633 slugging percentage, which also led the majors, and a 1.044 OPS that also led the majors. Mix in 32 home runs and 100 RBI season and only 95 strikeouts and over 500 at-bats that year. I mean, no wonder he won the AL MVP, right? That year was, he was the best hitter in the American League. Josh's story, if you don't know it, I mean, it's one of the most triumphant ones really out there in baseball. He was out of baseball for numerous years between 2003 and 2006, failed numerous drug tests, had a lot of off-the-field issues, but he was able to bounce back and ultimately lead his career into a better place where he would get his first crack at the majors in 2007. He made a huge impact starting with the Reds. After his 2010 MVP year, he played 5 more years, and in those 5 years, he was an All-Star 2 more times, a Silver Slugger in 2012, and also hit 4 home runs in 1 game in 2012 against the Baltimore Orioles. Now, he wouldn't post any higher than the 1.044 OPS he did in 2010 for the last 5 years, and his average started to drop, going from .359 in 2010 to .298 and then depreciating from there. He did hit a career high, however, in home runs in 2012, where he had 43 bombs and 128 RBIs. So he was still incredibly productive, but his final year in 2015, only 8 homers, 25 runs batted in 50 games. Again, not numbers that you would see or think that a former MVP could put up, but again, as time went on, he started to kind of, go on a little bit of a downhill there in his career. Again, although his career wasn't wildly long, the impact and imprint he left on the game, I think, will be felt for a very, very long time. Now, for Joey Votto, this was actually the start of Votto's reign in the NL as he went on to make 5 more All-Star teams after his MVP year. In 2010, Votto posted a .324 average with an MLB high .424 on-base percentage, an NL high .600 slugging percentage, and an NL high .1.024 OPS. In a very hitter-friendly ballpark, Votto really made his presence known from the plate. He also hit 37 homers and had a career-high 113 RBIs. So no question he was going to win the award that year. I mean, come on, you put up 30-plus homers, 100-plus RBIs, you're almost guaranteed to be at least in the MVP conversation. Votto has put up big numbers since then, as that 2010 year, was that start of Votto leading either the majors or NL in slugging percentage over the next 6 of 10 years. So power has been Votto's, middle name, really. And although he hasn't been the 30-plus homer, 100-plus RBI player that he usually was before, although he did put up 36 homers and 100 RBIs in 2017. So Votto winning that award was just the start of a really great hitting career that Votto has had since 2010. Now, moving into 2011, you got in the AL Justin Verlander and in the NL Ryan Braun. Justin Verlander, I mean, in 2011, that was an incredible year. Won the MVP, won the Cy Young, led the majors in strikeouts, innings pitched, wins, and ERA. Again, no wonder he won both awards. And since then, well, he has not shown any signs of slowing down, really. Since 2011, he's only had 1 year where he had a losing record. 1 year. Has been an All-Star 4 more years, in addition to being named to the team 3 other times before 2011, so 7-time All-Star, and has won a Cy Young at the age of 36. So his durability has not been a question, especially for him being the reigning Cy Young winner. That MVP year was a career year for Verlander in wins, where he had 24 total wins and only 5 losses. I mean, talk about dominating. The guy was just absolutely unhittable that season. He would lead the majors in strikeouts the following season, and he would lead the AL on 2 other occasions in strikeouts, with one season his strikeout total hitting 290, and in 2019 it hit 300. So a monster of a pitcher with incredibly high strikeout numbers. It's, again, not a shock to me that he's been an MVP and a Cy Young and an All-Star. He will be a Hall of Famer, no question. I really think that he'll probably be a first ballot Hall of Famer, in my opinion. Now, Ryan Braun for 2011. I mean, this one's kind of a hard one for me to discuss, mainly because I'll never forget that press conference that he had when Braun admitted that he, used steroids, and that was really the reason why he won the MVP. And he was an All-Star from 2008 to 2011, the year that he won the MVP, and then he was also named to the team 2 more times after that MVP year, and once in 2012 and once in 2015. And this is what is wild to me. I mean, prior to his steroid-filled season in 2011 to 2012, he had 5 to 6 years straight of hitting 300 or better and having 30-plus homers. Since the allegations and the suspension he received from Major League Baseball for his role in steroid use, he's been an All-Star only one time, and he's only had 1 year where he hit 300 or higher and 30 home runs. Now, after the 65-game suspension he received in 2013, it's pretty clear that his steroid use allowed him to be that good if the 5 years leading up to his MVP year and the allegations, he's an All-Star. I mean, he hits 25 or more home runs, and 1 year he hits 41 in 2012, and then his suspension carries him out of the 2013 year and into the 2014 year, and since then it's been clear the production has been on the decline and really not to the level that it was before all of this came out. I mean, I grew up being a huge fan of Braun and remember how good he was and the fear that fans, from other teams had in his bat, and it's unfortunate to see the downfall he's had since then, and, really kind of the reputation that he has now formed for himself in baseball. And I think that at one point it was very positive, and since then I think it's been painted in a totally different light. So in 2012, this next year, the AL was Miguel Cabrera and the NL was Buster Posey. Now, Miguel Cabrera, I mean, this man did so much damage in the AL and really the whole league from about 2004 to 2016. So a player who is comparable to Albert Pujols. I know that I mentioned, Albert Pujols is the best hitter of this generation, but Miguel Cabrera, I mean, rivals him in more ways than one. This was the year that Cabrera put up the historical numbers that he did, hitting for that Triple Crown by leading the league in home runs with 44, RBIs with 139, and batting average with 330. Not to mention he had a 606 slugging percentage and a 999 OPS, and in the following years, he was continuing his reign as one of the best hitters by being named to 4 more All-Stars, leading the league in batting average in 2013 and 2015, and not to mention winning a second straight MVP in 2013, where he just about put up the same numbers he did the year before, same home runs with 44, but the RBIs were only 2 off, with him collecting 137. Now, Miggy, as he is called, has been the definition of incredible, a first-ballot Hall of Famer. He's been having a career that, again, not many players can say that they've had, so, I mean, hats off to Miguel Cabrera. Buster Posey, on the other hand, one of the best catchers in the 2010s by far. His 2012 MVP year was just the beginning of his unbelievable run in the 2010s. He led the majors in average with a .336 percentage and had an OPS plus of 171, which also led the majors, and 103 RBIs. The next few years, he continued to play very well. He collected 70 or more RBIs from 2013 to 2016, not to mention 5 more All-Star nods, 3 Silver Sluggers, and he was part of 3 total World Series teams, one in 2010, and then in 2012, and then in 2014. With him not playing this year due to the pandemic, we don't know, what he would be doing this year, really, but I can almost guarantee that he would have put up the typical numbers of Buster Posey. I can almost guarantee that. I mean, in 2019, he had a pretty down year, only 7 homers and 37 or 38 RBIs in a couple, he didn't play a whole bunch of games, but, a good portion of the season. He batted .257. He did suffer that horrendous broken leg when he was covering home plate in 2011, but again, bouncing back incredibly after that type of injury, breaking your leg and then coming back the next year and winning the MVP. I mean, that is something that you must make note of, no question about it. Next year, 2013, again, in the AL, Miguel Cabrera, in the NL, Andrew McCutchen. Now, I already touched on Miguel Cabrera, so I want to focus now on the man himself, Andrew McCutchen. And this was right in the middle of his peak in play. I mean, from 2011 to 2015, he was an All-Star every year, really one of the best center fielders in baseball. He led the NL in hits in 2012 with 194. He batted .317 in 2013 and batted 84 runs in and knocked 21 homers. So some very solid numbers. Nothing incredible, but still really good numbers to put up for an MVP year. He won 2 more Silver Sluggers after that in 2014 and 2015 and led the majors in slugging percentage with a .410% in 2014. And then after 2015, he hasn't been the same McCutchen. Since then, he's yet to hit 300, and he's been up and down throughout the years with his RBI. So Kutch isn't the same Kutch of old, but he still remains, or is still remembered Is a very good player, great hitter, great fielder, and when he retires, I mean, he's going to be known for the great glove and great bat that he had. Moving into 2014 now, and this is starting to become the reign of Mike Trout as he wins his first of 3 MVPs, and then in the AL, and then in the NL, Clayton Kershaw, second pitcher to be named on this list. Now, Mike Trout, and I mean, you could say, I mean, you can't say anything about him negatively because what is there to point out about his game that needs to be improved, right? I mean, he's been the best player in baseball for at least this last 7 to 8 years. This would be the first of 3 MVPs, like I mentioned, that Trout would win, actually winning in 2016 again, and then the last year, also in 2019, being named the MVP of the AL. He led the AL in RBIs with 111 in the first of 3 MVP years. He batted .287 with a .939 OPS, but in his other MVP years, he was lights out. I mean, 2016, he hit .315. In 2019, he hit .291. He had 45 homers that year and 104 RBIs, which, again, not many players can say they've done in their careers. I mean, only a couple guys were able to hit over 40 home runs and over 100 RBIs last year, and him being one of them, it's no wonder he won the MVP. In 2014, again, he hit 36 home runs. And he's had a streak of at least 30-plus home runs in 5 of the last 6 seasons from 5 of the 6 seasons from 2014. So his numbers have been absolutely through the roof, and it's no wonder he's regarded as one of the best baseball players in this decade. And honestly, he might go down as the greatest player of all time. I really do believe that because of his performance he has put together on the field. I mean, not to mention really the only 5-tool player there is in baseball who can run, throw, hit, field, and he can hit for both power and contact. I mean, really, what can't Mike Trout do, right? Now, Clayton Kershaw, another pitcher on this list, and the only pitcher to win the Cy Young and the MVP in the same year on this list, other than Justin Verlander. And Clayton Kershaw had some of the best stuff pitching-wise in that 2014 year that I have ever seen. And the usual high leg kick that you never knew what he was going to throw, and he's been unbelievable since that year. In 2014, he led the majors in wins with 21, ERA with 1.77 ERA, 6 complete games, and he tossed 239 Ks. And the following year, he led the majors with 301 strikeouts and 232 2/3 innings pitched, and then led the NL in ERA in 2017 with a 2.31 ERA. His numbers have been up and down due to some injuries he's had over the years, but he's still been able to make 4 other All-Star teams after 2014, and last year he was an All-Star too, but again, his production was still, pretty solid, even with some injuries plaguing him. But, it's great to see that he's starting to get back into the groove of things, and he's been playing very well this year so far. He's also been over 200 strikeouts only 1 time since 2015. And every other year, he's been below 190. So the production, again, is down, but he is still a very efficient and dominating pitcher. Now, moving into 2015, in the AL, we had Josh Donaldson winning the MVP, and the NL, Bryce Harper. Josh Donaldson, 3-time All-Star, one of those years falling when he won the MVP in 2015. He led the AL with 123 RBIs in 2015, and he hit 41 home runs, which was the start of, 30-plus home run season for, again, a couple, or 2 straight 30-plus home run seasons for Donaldson. He batted .297 and had a .939 OPS, and I know I keep mentioning the OPS numbers because in today's baseball, that stat is carried very heavily as opposed to those other years. So it's always fun to look back at what those guys' OPS numbers are and compare them to how they would have, stacked up today, and a lot of these guys would have some of the best OPS numbers in baseball. I will say, though, his numbers have not been anything spectacular since 2015. He did hit 37 home runs in 2016 and 33 home runs in 2017, but his average has not been higher than 290 since then, and his average has dipped down to as low as 234, and this year's been a hard year for Donaldson, only batting 182, and that is a big step down from last year where he hit 259, but had a 900 OPS and had 37 home runs and 94 RBIs, which were the best numbers he had put up since 2017. Now, hopefully Donaldson can bounce back to have the years, he had in the middle of the 2010s, because this Braves team, I think, is going to really depend on him. Bryce Harper, he came into the MLB on fire. It was an All-Star the first 2 years in the league, and then in 2015, boom, he exploded. Led the NL in home runs with 42, had 99 RBIs, led the league in OBP with a .460%, .649 slugging percentage, and a 1.109 OPS, which all 3 led the league. And over an 1,100 OPS, a lot of these guys that are leading the league, they probably A couple of them around 1,100, 1,200. Most of them are floating around 1,000. Having an 1,100 OPS, I mean, that is unbelievable. So he tore it up from the plate in 2015, no question about it. Not to mention he had 124 walks, also, which makes sense as to why his OBP was so high. And since then, he's been an all-star 3 other times. He had a 100 RBI season in 2018 with 34 home runs and a 114 RBI season with 35 home runs in 2019. So the last 2 years, his power numbers have been absolutely lights out, really. I mean, those last 2 years with 30-plus homers are 2 of the 3 seasons he had 30-plus homers in his career, and yes, the other one is his MVP season. This year, he is back at it with a .317 average, 7 homers, 20 RBIs, so another good year for Harper. It's just unfortunate the season has been the way it's been with the pandemic. Now, moving into 2016, AL was Mike Trout, as we already mentioned, and the NL was Chris Bryant. So, like I mentioned, I already talked about Trout, so I want to stick with Bryant. And he had a heck of a year in 2016. Not to mention, it was the year that his team, the Chicago Cubs, won the World Series for the first time in 108 years. In his second year in the majors, he won an MVP, named to an All-Star, and won a World Series, not to mention the Hank Aaron Award winner being named the top hitter in the NL. So, first 2 years, I mean, your second year in baseball, you're doing that much. I mean, talk about a roller coaster of a ride. That's got to be such an unbelievable feeling as a young baseball player playing that well and really dominating against his peers. He hit 39 home runs that year and drove in 102 runs and batted .292, had an OPS of .939. Both 39 homers and 102 RBIs are career highs for Bryant. And with him being 28 years old, I mean, the sky's the limit for him. And he's coming off a 31 homer, 77 RBI last season, and a 133 OPS plus. Now his OPS plus is a little down from when he was an MVP, which was 146, but he's still been a huge piece to his team's success and really in recent years. Now moving into our last 2 years, we've got 2017, the AL, Jose Altuve, and the NL, Giancarlo Stanton. Jose Altuve in 2017 really proved, to finally pay off as a big year for him. He won the MVP because, I mean, leading up to it, he'd been an all-star of the previous 5 years, and he led the league in both hits in 2014 and 2016, not to mention led the AL in hits from 2014 to 2017. He's consistently regarded as one of the best hitters in baseball, but he's been struggling this year, really, regarded as one of the better hitters, but again, having a year that he's been having, not a great sign. I mean, he's creeping along that Mendoza line, might inch his way further down if he doesn't do anything about his performance from the plate, and from 2014 to 2017, you could argue he was, top 3, if not the number 1 hitter in the league, leading the majors in batting average as well in 2014 and 2017, and consistently coming in the top 3 in hits every single year. I mean, talk about consistency and living up to, the expectations set before you the year before and continuing to capitalize on those, capitalize on those years that he was having. I mean, it's a great sign from him. He's also been a Silver Slugger the 3 years leading up to 2017, and in both 2017 and 2018, he was instrumental in the Astros' run to the playoffs and the World Series win, but again, he's now started to come under scrutiny because of the cheating scandal and him being a big-time player named in the whole ordeal. A lot of people aren't a big fan of his anymore, especially, how he was regarded before. I'm pretty sure I saw something a while ago that his jersey sales were through the roof before this whole scandal came out, and then afterwards, they plummeted because people, again, his reputation kind of went sour a little bit. If he's able to turn things around this year and maybe help the Astros, close that gap a little bit on the A's, they could really catch them, but again, they'd have to really play well and turn things around because the A's are on fire right now. Giancarlo Stanton is one of the most feared hitters in the league. Although he's a very injury-prone player, he's been a 4-time All-Star, winning 2 Silver Sluggers and the home run and RBI leader in 2017. So although Altuve might have been arguably the best hitter, I think that Giancarlo is right there with him in that same time frame from about 2014 to 2017. 2017, he won the award in a runaway 59 home runs, which led all of baseball, 132 RBIs, which also led all of baseball, and a 1.007 OPS with an NL high 631 slugging percentage. So Stanton has proven why people consider him to be, such a strong, powerful hitter because of the numbers he puts up. Battling injuries this year has definitely, and in previous years, I mean, he has yet to be named to another All-Star team since 2017. He's still hit over 100 RBIs in 2018, and he's been very injury-ridden the last few years, knee injuries, hamstring problems. So he's been a liability, but when he comes in and he's healthy, I mean, easily one of the best hitters in baseball, and the Yankees all of a sudden become an easy 4-5, top contender for the World Series. Moving into 2018 now, the AL was Mookie Betts, and the NL was Christian Yelich. Mookie Betts, this was a huge year for Betts. Led the majors in batting average and slugging percentage and runs. Hit 32 home runs and 80 RBIs, and for a guy that hits around the top of the lineup and a lot of the time, leads off, having those kinds of numbers is pretty impressive and something that is very unique. He's got an awesome glove, does a tremendous job in right field, and this year for the Dodgers, he's batting .387 with a .970 OPS, which is the second highest OPS for him since when? 2018. So he could be on his way to another similar year. And obviously with the circumstances not quite the same, but something very similar, without a doubt. If he keeps hitting this way and the way he's been, this Dodgers team, they're going to do some serious damage in the league. Now for Christian Yelich, he also had a career year, to say the least. Batted what was at the time his career high of a .325 batting average, but his next year he, hits .329 as he topped his MVP year in that category, which is, very hard. Even though it wasn't a huge jump, it's still an upward trend. And with 36 homers, 110 RBIs, which were a career high for him in RBIs, he dominated the NL. He followed the next year with a 97 RBI season and a career high 44 home runs. So 2018 was his initial career year, but then the next year it was actually 2019 that was his career year. Unbelievable numbers. He was pivotal for the Brewers in their run towards the end of the year when I believe, something like 20-7 or something along those lines in the month of August that year, wound up tying Chicago, and as we know, forced a game 163 that they won, and they'd lose in the NLCS, but his year was marked as a big-time moment for his career. 2018, 2019 have catapulted him to the conversation for one of the best hitters in baseball in just 2 years alone. He had 80 home runs. That is a jump that I've never really, you don't really see a whole lot. So hopefully this year he's able to turn things around, because if not, it's going to be, a really long year for not only Milwaukee, but him also, and it's going to be unfortunate if, he can't turn things around quickly. So the final year, 2019, again, AL was Mike Trout, NL was Cody Bellinger, and like I've mentioned a bunch about Mike Trout, I want to get into Cody Bellinger, who is, again, showing why, he showed why he's considered one of the best of the 2010s. It's because of, Mike Trout is really showing why he's one of the best of the 2010s because of the 3 MVPs he won. But again, we want to talk about Bellinger. He's been unbelievable in his few years in the league. Yes, he's down considerable. He's down a little bit this year in terms of his numbers, but he's done considerable damage to, not only my team when they play, but, again, other teams. And again, he's got to be respected. The guy can flat out hit. He hit 47 home runs, which wasn't the NL high or Major League high, which is pretty wild to think about, and had 115 RBIs. So over 40 home runs, almost 50 and 100 plus RBIs. No wonder he won the MVP. Basically, the only other guy in the NL that has been in the conversation with him is Yelich, really. In the last 2 years, they have clearly been the best 2 hitters in baseball in 2019 and Yelich in 2018. Bellinger's bounce-back year from 2018, where he hit 25 homers, 76 RBIs, and 260, it all jumped in 2019, going up to 305 for his batting average, 47 homers, and 115 RBIs. Again, a 2-time All-Star and Silver Slugger. No wonder he won the MVP, and he's not even 28 years old. This guy's got a long, very successful career ahead of him. So that'll close it out here for us in our second segment on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. Coming up after the commercial break, I'll get into the biggest MLB busts of all time and what kind of careers they had after how highly touted they were going into their careers. Folks, it's been a lot of fun so far, but we got a lot more to go. So don't change that channel. We'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be, visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Great to have you all still with me today. Jack Ridenauer again, and we just finished up discussing the last 10 MVPs in each league and the careers they have had since their monumental year in their career. I want to now get into this next segment, starting to talk about the biggest MLB busts of all time and, what their careers looked like when they were in the major leagues and kind of how they panned out afterwards. Now, some of these players may be familiar names to everyone, and some of these guys did not have as bad of careers as others did on this list. But I just want to highlight a few of the different players that, never really panned out the way they were supposed to. The first player might come as a shock because he did have an all-right career, and that is J.D. Drew. Yes, I can't believe I'm picking a former All-Star, although just one time, and someone who was incredibly, incredibly talented coming out of college. I mean, incredibly talented coming out of college. As a Florida State Seminole, Drew was unstoppable. He hit 30 home runs and stole 30 bases in 1 year of college and was also the first player in college history to do that. So he swept all of the major Player of the Year awards in the league, and he was able to be named to an All-ACC selection, ACC Player of the Year, and an All-American. I mean, Drew is widely considered one of the most, if not the most, highly touted college scouts ever in the history of the MLB draft. And back to his 30 and 30 year, he did it in 67 games. So no wonder there was so much surrounding him as a player. It's because of his incredible abilities he had in college. He broke 17 school and conference records and set a Florida State record for batting average in a season with a .455 average. So some staggering numbers to put up in a college career, especially when they do not play nearly as many games. Now, while in the majors, he did enjoy 2 years of massive success, hitting .323 in 2001 and .305 in 2004, where he also finished sixth in the MVP race. Again, an interesting thing occurred in his career when he was being drafted, where the year prior to him being taken initially, where he was taken as the second pick by the Phillies, two players, Travis Lee and Matt White, they had actually figured out a way to make themselves as rookies, essentially free agents on the market, forcing teams to, sign them to more money. They kind of found this loophole in the system, and they were able to sign to much larger contracts than rookies were usually used to. The Phillies didn't worry that, Drew would try to negotiate a better deal, but he did, because scouts were saying he was more pro-ready than the other two players, Lee and White. And this caused the Phillies and Drew to come to kind of a standstill in negotiations after he was drafted. So, he decided to play independent ball with the St. Paul Saints. And then the next year, he was taken as the fifth overall pick by the Cardinals and signed for $4 million more than what the Phillies were willing to give him. I think the Phillies were giving him $3.1 million, and he signed for $7 million with the Cardinals. So, good move on his part. And again, when you think about the hype that swirled around Drew, some scouts had painted him as a future Hall of Famer. I mean, you have to admit, that's not a whole lot of success. Having 2 years of batting over 300 in a 14-year career, one All-Star nod, and you're touted as, a Hall of Fame baseball player. That really just doesn't, I think, go well in my book personally. Next guy, Mark Apel. Now, this might be a name people don't know, but he was a standout nonetheless, a former number 1 overall pick that didn't even break into the major leagues, a lights-out pitcher for Stanford. He was the pitcher of the year in 2012 and was projected a top 10 pick, but decided not to go pro and didn't sign with the Pirates. He then went first overall the next year to the Astros. Now, when he arrived in Houston, he put up solid numbers initially. In Single A, he was 3-1 with 33 Ks in 38 innings and a 3.79 ERA. When he made his way to the Advanced A team in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, he was awful, with over a 9 ERA, 2-5 record. Somehow he was promoted to Double A. I don't know how you get promoted with over a 9 ERA, but I guess if you're that highly touted, maybe there's some things that are easier for you to move up in, and some other things not, and the minor leagues being one of them, because a 9 ERA would not constitute anybody moving up in, levels in the farm system. He was named to the Futures All-Star game, but he was traded from the Astros and quickly started the career downfall. So that is where things kind of got really bad for Apel towards the end. He was sent to the Phillies and never made it out of the minors, and was ultimately out of baseball after 4 years of bouncing around, and ended his baseball career at 26. So pretty sad way of going out, and it was really unfortunate, turn of events in his career that led to him, to his number 1 overall selection really meaning nothing. Next guy I got to mention, Danny Goodwin. Now, Goodwin was an interesting case as to why he was a bust, mainly because he never turned out to be the player, people thought he was, especially the Angels and the White Sox. The LA Angels and the Chicago White Sox both selected him with the first overall pick in 1917 and 1975. So once out of high school and once out of college, and you're picked as the first overall selection in both drafts. And I have talked a lot to a lot of minor league players, and they've all who have been drafted in both high school and in college, and they each say it's a wild feeling either way. And to be selected as the first overall pick in both instances probably is even more wild, to say the least. He was a college All-American at Southern University and A&M in Louisiana, not to mention the Sporting News Player of the Year in 1975. So a two-time first overall pick selection in baseball, which he is the only player to do that in baseball history. He entered the minor leagues with the Angels and saw some decent success early on. However, he sustained a shoulder injury early on in his career. It caused him to move from his usual position as a catcher. And again, he wasn't very good at many other positions. And so that was really kind of the beginning to the end. In his rookie year, he batted .275 with 2 homers and 18 RBIs in Double-A for the Angels, and was actually called up to the majors after that performance. But he went 1 for 10 from the plate and compiled 5 strikeouts in those 10 at-bats. So a game that did not translate well into the professional level. And in 1977, he continued to build on his impressive minor league career and wound up batting .305 with 10 home runs and 66 RBIs. And he was eventually called up again in 1977. He never did much of anything, though, when being called up. I mean, he only batted .209. He had 1 home run, 8 RBIs, so a very lackluster professional career that followed him around for really many years. He never amounted to much of anything in his career, playing for 7 different teams over the span of about 10 or 11 years in the majors. So to be a 2-time first overall pick and barely pass the Mendoza line in the pros, I think that says volume about you as a player and a bust, really. The next guy, and this is kind of an unfortunate story just because of all the off-the-field issues this guy had, Matt Bush. Now, here's a guy that had all the talent in the world and essentially threw it all away. Considered one of the best 5-tool players to come out of high school. Bush wound up getting drafted out of high school, number 1 overall to the San Diego Padres. He batted .450 of 11 homers and 35 RBIs, not to mention he had a 94-mile-an-hour fastball in high school and a really good curveball and a 5-1 record on the mound. So it's no wonder why Bush was so highly touted and highly regarded coming out of high school. He was initially drafted as a shortstop before becoming a pitcher in the minor leagues. He was actually suspended for a bar fight he was involved in before he actually even played a single major league game. So someone who, again, battled with some big-time off-the-field issues a lot, which we will touch on more momentarily. And in 2005, he hit a dismal .221, and in 2006, he broke his ankle, causing him to miss half the year. He would come back in 2007 only to tear a ligament in his arm, and it forced him to really miss the entire 2007 year. He received Tommy John surgery in the offseason, forcing him to miss all of 2008. Again, he had another off-the-field issue where it was reported in 2009 he was intoxicated in a parking lot of a high school where it said he apparently assaulted 2 high school kids. And again, he actually, I read into the story, he basically beat one of the kids with a golf club. So somebody that had a lot of anger problems and somebody that had some major anger issues, and I don't know what it could have been, but he definitely had some problems, and it really attributed to his downfall as a player, I think. His off-the-field issues continue to pile up, with another incident occurring this time involving a woman at a party he was at in Florida. This resulted in Bush throwing a baseball at her head after she did something, not quite sure what, but I think the story was that she might have drawn something on him when he was sleeping or something or other, and he threw a baseball at her head, started banging on her car window trying to get her out of the car, and the Blue Jays, who he was traded to after his stint with the Padres, ultimately released him the very next day. So his career never turned into anything special, really. I mean, logging not even 200 major league innings of play, numerous arrests, and one of them stemming from actually a drunken motorcycle accident, which resulted in him hitting a man with his motorcycle and resulted in him being sentenced to 51 months in prison. And he eventually had his license actually revoked in the state of Florida after receiving numerous DUIs. So again, a player that unfortunately was unable to really live up to the expectations that people expected him to perform at, which is, again, unfortunate. It mixed in with all the off-the-field problems never makes for a good recipe of success, ever. You never want to have a player that has that many problems, especially if they're drawing that much negative attention and negative publicity towards your major league team. The last guy that I have to make mention of, and I was, again, very disappointed with how he turned out, especially with how highly regarded of a player he was, Greg Reynolds. I mean, a standout pitcher at Stanford, Stanford. He saw a lot of success pitching for the Cardinals. He was a highly regarded prospect heading into the 2006 draft, selected by the Rockies with the number 2 overall pick. Reynolds was actually chosen over other standouts like Clayton Kershaw, Evan Longoria, who the Rockies actually wanted to draft, fun fact, but because of ownership stepping in and pretty much overruling, they weren't able to draft Evan Longoria, and we kind of see how that all panned out. And also Max Scherzer, all going on to be all-stars, and the 2 pitchers winning Cy Youngs. I mean, how do you pass up on those guys? And I know at that point you can only do so much by reading the scouting report and reading, the background on these guys and looking at their numbers and evaluating them and scouting them. So there's only so much you can do going into the draft when you've never seen them play in an actual major league game. I get that. But having Kershaw, Scherzer, and Longoria all be passed up, that's not good. That is not good, especially for the Rockies. And again, I mean, especially with a team think about it. Colorado, not too soon after that, they would wind up in the World Series. Imagine if they had drafted Scherzer or Kershaw or Longoria and added that dimension to their team. They might have even gone further into the playoffs, might have won the World Series over the Cardinals that one year. There might be a little bit of a stretch because that Cardinals team was really, really good, but it's fun to imagine. After a lackluster first 2 years in the majors, Reynolds was sent down to the minors in 2010, and he was traded in 2012 to the Rangers, who ultimately released him after the season was over. He'd play another year in the majors with the Reds, who ultimately designated him for assignment midway through the year, and then he wound up having stints in the Japanese Professional League. He played for the Saitama Seibu Alliance, and then finished out with the Padres, whom, he didn't even play a major league game for after being signed in February of 2016, and then he was released in May of the same year. A combination of shoulder injuries and just, really bad luck, essentially, resulted in his demise, and he was out of baseball after 2016, pitched a combined total of only 21 games in his very short career. So again, really unfortunate to see guys that are so highly touted come into, the majors with nothing. Performing and being very, very lackluster. One, name that I did think about putting on this list that I think we know a little bit more about as a bust, Billy Beane. If you've seen the movie Moneyball, Billy Beane was the general manager for the Oakland Athletics and then would go on to work with the Red Sox. And, he was quintessential in changing the way, being one of the few people to change the way in which baseball is scouted and looked at and the numbers and the statistics that go into it. He was a highly touted baseball player. And if you haven't seen the movie, I highly suggest you go check it out. But he was a very, very sought-after prospect. And it was unfortunate because, he never panned out to anything. And, in the movie, I know it's probably loosely depicted, but in the movie, you see the flashbacks of Billy Beane and when he's signing his high school career and the scouts are all sitting there with his family or signing his professional career out of high school. And, they're all saying, hey, this kid's going to be something special. He's got the tools. He's a 5-tool player. And then there's other flashbacks as the movie goes on, and you start to see that it just didn't pan out and he didn't become the player that everybody thought he was going to be. So, again, there's been a lot of guys that have been bust, and it's unfortunate that there are players like these guys that have, so much high praise going into their careers, and I don't know if it's nerves or an over-exaggeration of one's talent, but these guys who are so well-regarded sometimes, they just fizzle out because of injuries and off-the-field issues or just overall problems, and it's really sad to see. It's really, really sad to see, especially guys that, come into and you hear so much about, it's almost heartbreaking to hear just how their season and their career is just so promising, yet in a blink of an eye, the wool is pulled over, and that's all she wrote for their careers. They're out of baseball in 4 or 5 years. And baseball is an unforgiving sport. It's a sport based on failure. So it is hard to, and it's also probably the hardest sport to fight your way out of the minor leagues and make it to the major leagues. So I can see why guys might have, a tough time fighting their way into those positions and into those, solid spots on major league teams and living up to the expectations that people have made for them and set forth for them. And so, anybody out there that is a highly touted prospect, I would say don't let it get to your head. Just keep doing what you're doing. Tuck your chin into your chest, as they say, and just keep moving forward. So that would be Jack Ridenour's little bit of advice for any prospects out there that want to take it. So that'll do it for us in this segment, folks. Thanks again for sticking around. But stay right there. We'll be right back after this commercial break for the final segment here today, where I will share which cities I personally could see sports coming to next and where baseball could expand into next. Keep tuning in, everyone, because we'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup final.
Listen now.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the final segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Ridenauer is still with you, and in the last segment I discussed the MLB's biggest bust of all time and what kind of careers they had in their short-lived Major League career. I want to now discuss a new topic for the final segment today that has always fascinated me, which is baseball expansion and where we could see baseball teams appear next in the MLB in our country. And it's a conversation that I've had with many people. I always am very intrigued where not only baseball teams but other sports teams might wind up in, the next 5 years, maybe 10 years, if there's a team that is possibly trying to be sold right now and is going to be moved somewhere else or whatever it might be. So I got a list of, about 8, 9 cities or so that I feel like baseball would do pretty well. And actually, some of these cities have talked about moving baseball into their said city. So the first one I have to make note of is Las Vegas. Vegas has already got a football team coming their way. There is rumors of a basketball team expanding, and then there's also a hockey team that just expanded there and has had a lot of success. If you mix in the fact that Las Vegas is the casino gambling hub of our country and sports gambling is legal, it would not shock me if a big city like Vegas and a big sports gambling kind of environment like Vegas were to get all 4 professional teams. Now, do I think it will come instantly, all after another? Probably not. I think that basketball will be next because basketball is pretty big in Vegas. But baseball should not be discredited. They've got a AAA team for the Athletics, the Las Vegas 51s that are already there. So they've seen how baseball works there. They've seen how it's received by everybody. It's also a warmer climate. So different kinds of weather factors will not come into play at all. It'll be interesting to see if Vegas were to ever get a baseball team. And I know that if you have hockey, football, and basketball, those summer months are wide open. They're wide open. And so if you want to fill up those summer months and make sure that, as Vegas being the city it is still generating money through sports, I would say add, a baseball team. I really would. Now, what kind of name? I don't know, maybe the Las Vegas Jokers, a little play with gambling, or, the Las Vegas Chips, like poker chips. I don't know. I don't know of a name. I can't think of a name right now, but I think Vegas would be a very likely destination for an MLB team. Next city, Portland. Now, Portland almost actually had a baseball team move to their city 2 different times. In 2003, when the Expos were looking for a new place, they almost moved. So they went from Montreal to Washington, D.C., but the Expos, they had been in a lot of conversation with Portland, and Portland had actually been given access and been granted money to fund and to basically put together a baseball team. Things kind of fell through. They ultimately, with Washington, D.C., the Marlins also considered relocating in 2007, which is very ironic because Miami has won 2 World Series in their time as a team. And for them to want to relocate, 4 years after winning a World Series, that is alarming. But I think Portland would be a really good one because, yes, the weather is not the most ideal for baseball, but the Mariners have shown that they can get it done. So if the Mariners can get it done, why not Portland? And Portland is a huge sports city. I don't know if people really noticed that, but they've got a massive following with the Trailblazers. I know the soccer team, I believe, is the Portland Timbers. They've done very well too in their recent start and really initiation into professional sports. They've played very, very well. The Portland Pilots or maybe the Portland Pioneers or something like that. I think that would be kind of an interesting name. I think that would be kind of a cool name to have. And I think that, that it's something that Portland is looking for, right? As a city that is still, kind of growing. It's starting to expand a little bit. It's kind of not a huge city like LA is or Vegas is, but it's still got a large amount of people, still got a large population. And as a result, in the summertime, people are probably itching for sports after, 9 months of basketball. They probably are asking, hey, let's get some baseball going. So I could see Portland potentially being a destination, as it's already been talked about, actually, so that could possibly happen down the road. My next city, Nashville, Tennessee. I think Nashville, in my opinion, would be the most likely next city, next to Vegas, that a baseball team moves into. Not only because of the weather, but because they have two other professional sports teams that do very well. The Titans are very popular, and the Predators, their hockey team, do very well. And I live in a city in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that has a football, hockey, and baseball team. And I can tell you right now that the reception of all of those sports is very high, except for the fact that the Pirates are not very good. They still have a good following, and you know that if the Pirates are good that year, people will follow. I think the same thing will go for Nashville. Let's say the Titans have a really good year like they did last year. The Predators have a really good year. All of a sudden, people are itching for more sports. They're asking for more sports. It's a growing city, and it's in an ideal weather location. There's actually been also a lot of news floating around about a team actually expanding out there, a team going by the name of the Nashville Stars. And there's been a lot of discussions with various financial groups about opening up a baseball team in the MLB in Nashville. Rob Manfred has, talked with people about it, and there's potentially, some likelihood that could be a landing spot for some of these, or for the MLB, and a next place for these teams to appear. I think that also the fact that if you mix in the kind of the country feel of how, it's one of the biggest country music hubbubs mixed in with baseball in the summertime, I think the people of Nashville would love that. I really do. I think it's something that they would enjoy and that they would get a kick out of. And so I think Nashville next to Vegas would be the most likely city to get a baseball team. The next one, Montreal. And I know I said most of these cities are going to be in our country. This city is not, obviously. And I'm really looking to see if Canada can add another baseball team. I talked to somebody that I know not too long ago. He's a head men's baseball coach in America, but he's Canadian born. And he was saying how baseball has drastically grown in his city, in his country in the last 20, 30 years. So it's a growing sport. The Expos have already been there, and they were very popular. People have been itching to get the Expos back. I remember last year when they talked about the Tampa Bay Rays possibly splitting time between Tampa and Montreal and being kind of this swing team, if you will, going back and forth. I don't know, a seasonal team. I don't know how they described it, but something along those lines. Lots of people were geared up for that, and I have a couple very good friends that are big Rays fans, and I know they were not too happy about that. And they have kind of a bleak outlook on the future of the Rays. So could we see a team like the Rays, although they've had a lot of success, not a huge fan base, not a huge following, not a huge market? So could they start to go up towards Canada, who is probably dying for a baseball team right now? And especially, again, weather-wise, probably not the most ideal, but if it's the summertime in the North American continent, it's probably going to be okay weather for 80% of the time. And in all honesty, I don't think guys would be that mad if it was a little bit cooler going up to Montreal. And also, the Toronto Blue Jays, they have a dome. So if anything, they can just get a dome. So I think that the Montreal could be a city where that expands in Canada. I've also thought about maybe Ottawa being a city that expands. But I just think that baseball needs to have another foothold in Canada somewhere, whether it's on the eastern side of the country, the western side of the country, wherever it might be. I think that baseball would fit in very nicely, as it's already shown that it can, in Canada. Next city, New Orleans. New Orleans would be such a great place for baseball. The fans, they love their sports down there. They love their Saints. I know the Pelicans are kind of a growing fan base with the addition of Zion Williamson and everything, but I think that as time goes on, the Pelicans will start to get a bigger following. And so as a result, I think what's going to happen, again, this is probably more of a long-term project for New Orleans if this were to happen. That they take, let's say, the Saints have 2 or 3 really good years, and the Pelicans start to play very well, and they start to change the outlook of how their franchise is viewed right now. all of a sudden, people are saying, hey, where's the baseball team? Can we get because hockey's not going to be big down there. I really don't think hockey would be a popular sport in New Orleans. I think baseball would do much better. I mean, LSU, Louisiana State University, they have a fantastic baseball program. They play in the SEC, one of the best baseball schools in the entire country. So they could potentially be, a landing spot for a team. I don't know. Again, I don't know what you would call them. I'm trying to think of names for New Orleans. I don't really know a whole lot of things that are staple to New Orleans. I mean, I don't know, the New Orleans Crawfish or, the New Orleans Cajun, or I don't know. I can't think of a name. But I think that New Orleans, for the most part, plus it's a big party city. People like to go out and have a good time. The summertime, I could totally see some downtown area of New Orleans. Again, I've never personally been there, but I could see a downtown area of New Orleans popping up if there is a baseball team, around where the Pelicans maybe play or maybe where the Saints play. And all of a sudden you've got teams that are saying, hey, or you've got people saying, hey, let's go down and catch a game, and then we'll go out afterwards, and that's how you get people to go out and do stuff. When you've got a baseball team like that, it's the summertime, people want to go out and do things. And again, it's all about just looking at the market and what's needed and what's not. And I think that if you've got any market that has two or fewer sports and one of those sports is as a fan base, being the Pelicans in New Orleans case, I think that it's starting to justify having a baseball team or at least another sort of sports team in the professional fashion move into that market. Mainly because I think that if that does happen, I think we could see, a growth in viewership in sports down there. I think we could see a growth in fandom and everything in between. So I think that, New Orleans would be a very likely landing spot. Next city is St. Paul. Now, this is kind of a random one, I know, but why I'm picking this city is St. Paul used to have a baseball team. Fun fact, it was the Chicago White Sox. The Chicago White Sox, before they were the Chicago White Sox, were the St. Paul Apostles. What happened was their owner at the time, Charles Comiskey, who, funny enough, is named after Comiskey Field, or Comiskey Field is named after him. He decided to take the St. Paul Apostles and bring them into Chicago because the new AL that had turned from the Western League, they went to the American League, they became a professional league, and they granted access, basically, to a team being moved into Chicago. So he packed his team up and moved them down there. The team actually came back into St. Paul, though, because they stayed as a minor league team. They stayed as the St. Paul Saints. It was actually the Minneapolis Millers that were the team in Minneapolis. But this is in the 1800s, 1900s, and the reason why I know this is because I did some research on it the other day, and that's what happens when boredom really sets in. You start to look up very random things. I couldn't believe I was looking up Western League baseball stats from 1895, and I was even more shocked that I found them. I believe it was on Stat Crew. So thank you, Stat Crew, for coming in the clutch there and giving me some added information that I am able to share, because if not, I probably would have sounded like a bumbling idiot. But anyways, St. Paul Saints were ranked as one of the top 100 minor league teams in all of baseball history. So a very well-liked team, a team that did very well for themselves, a team that was very popular. And I feel like in Minnesota, you've got everything in Minneapolis. I'm not quite sure where teams play in terms of if it's in Minneapolis or St. Paul, because they call them the Twin Cities. But I think that moving a team over into St. Paul, it would add a little bit of competition for the Twins, a little crosstown rivalry, which we've seen in New York can happen, we've seen in LA it can happen, we've seen in Chicago it can happen. It makes for an interesting, matchup and something that people really enjoy and people can get behind on. And not to mention it's a new market. It's an untested major league market, and if you go in with the idea of, hey, baseball has done well here before, why not continue on that trend and bring in another baseball team, right? So do I think that is a likely one? No, but I do think that if that were to happen, I could see the reasoning behind it, and I could see why there was that thought process going into it, mainly because they've had experience with at least a baseball team, and it has done very well for the city. So I think St. Paul would be an interesting one. The next city, Louisville. Louisville is home to Louisville Slugger, obviously. All the baseballs, all the baseball bats, everything that baseball uses comes from Louisville. They've got a minor league team there. They've got a great fan base for the Louisville Cardinals. I mean, people in Kentucky, okay, I went to Kentucky before the pandemic struck with my girlfriend, and I was, as a big sports guy, I always pay attention to not just the game, but everything else around the city. The fans, how loud it gets, how passionate they are, how into the game they are. And, in addition to being a big baseball guy, I love basketball too. And we went to a Kentucky Wildcats basketball game and a Louisville Cardinals basketball game. And I was absolutely floored with how passionate these people are for college basketball. And they have no professional sports in Kentucky. None. Zero. Zilch. Nada. So a market that is untested in that, but I think they would do surprisingly well. Not to mention Lexington is not too far. So people in Lexington would come down and root for Louisville. So if you think about it, Louisville, that's got about 600,000 or so people in its metropolitan area, starts to get the people from Lexington, that's again about 350, 400,000 people. That's almost, a million people right there coming and watching and supporting a baseball team, at least just to start, because again, they don't have anything to all rally around, because everybody in Lexington's all Kentucky stuff and everybody in Louisville is all Louisville stuff. So if you start to bring in, a team that I think the entire city can rally around, not to mention, it's a somewhat warmer climate. Sports can be played there for longer periods of time. Now it does get cold, it gets rainy, but I think that Louisville, it's a passionate sports town. People love their basketball. And I think baseball would do just as well. You've got literally the Louisville Slugger Museum in downtown Louisville. Why wouldn't an MLB team just go ahead and make their mark known in that market? I think it would do really well. So these last two cities, last 3 cities, these are kind of just throw cities I just threw out there, just, random ideas, kind of hypotheticals, if you will. I don't really believe these last 3 cities could actually form any sort of market. Boise, Idaho, I picked that because it's, again, a middle of nowhere city in Idaho that love sports, with Boise State being kind of the main focus there. And if you bring in a baseball team, it's going to generate revenue for the city. It's going to generate jobs for people in the area. It's going to give people something to root for. And those states right there, Montana, Wyoming, North South Dakota, they don't have anything going on, right? They don't have a whole lot of sports, or they don't have a whole lot of professional, athletics to all get behind and watch. So as a result, I really do think that, Boise, if it were to happen, it could potentially work. It could, just because there is a passionate fan base there. But again, in the long run, I don't think it will happen. And then the last 2 cities, either Raleigh, North Carolina, or Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, I think Charlotte would be more likely of an area, because I've heard the weather there is beautiful all year long. North Carolina baseball is very prominent. People really like baseball down there, and you're starting to, inch your way into the southern states a little bit more, and that's where baseball is really popular. And Raleigh, that's another not too far city from Charlotte that I think, would love to have a professional team. I believe that's where the Hurricanes play right now. So adding another professional team in that area, not to mention you have UNC, and then, Durham with Duke down the road. You've got a lot of sports around there. If you add a baseball team in the mix, you've already got football, you've got hockey, and you've got basketball. And the football team's been, up and down the last couple of years. The hockey team does well, and the basketball team's been iffy. So if you add a baseball team in there, it's a growing city, it's a growing market. People also love their sports down there. I actually have a couple friends who have gone down to Charlotte. I know one person who actually lives in Charlotte, or not too far from it, and everybody says it's an unbelievable city. I get nothing but great reviews about Charlotte. So I think Charlotte would be a great destination. I think Raleigh would too, but I think Charlotte out of the 2 would be the better ones. But again, it'll be interesting to see where baseball winds up next and where the cities might expand to. It's already got 30 or so teams in it, or in the MLB, so if they expand, it's going to be a little off. If they needed to add 2 cities, Portland, Nashville, Charlotte, Nashville, St. Paul, Louisville, whatever, I think that those would be some likely candidates to potentially house the next MLB team. So that'll wrap it up for us here today. Again, thank you so much for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. We're always looking for feedback, and we appreciate anybody who would like to share it with us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay up to date on any updates on news, content, episodes, whatever, that also will help us out big time. Again, thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. And until next time, have a great day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.